The Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Pride Seeds, Nodulator Pro, and Cruiser Max Vibrance Beans.
Bernard Tobin here at the Southwest Ag Conference for the Soybean School, and talking soybeans today with Greg Tylka, who's a scientist from Iowa State University. Sir, thank you for dropping by.
Bernard, thank you for having me.
Now, you've got one of the greatest jobs in the world because you focus just on soybean cyst nematodes. I mean, that's just your focus, right?
Yeah, some people say I think like a nematode, so I'm not sure if that's a compliment or an insult, but I was hired to work almost exclusively on doing research on the biology of soybean cyst nematode and then using that research results to help farmers manage the problem.
Yeah. Now, let's look at the bottom line here. One is you said in your presentation that's SCN, #1 pest disease pathogen soybeans in North America.
Yeah, and the reason it's #1 in North America is it's so widespread, it's in so many fields, it has the potential to literally almost kill the plants under extreme conditions. It reduces yields on its own by stunting the roots and taking food from the plant, and then it also encourages other plant diseases like a soil-borne fungus disease called sudden death syndrome. So there's many different reasons why SCN is the most damaging pathogen, and it causes yield loss many different ways.
Now, one of the key things from a management perspective, there's a number of them, but resistant varieties and sources of resistance. And overall, I mean, the difference between a susceptible and a resistant variety, what yield hit are you looking at?
Well, in Iowa, under normal years where we have good rainfall, the yield hit could be 10%, so 7 or 8 or 9 bushels per acre. But in those hot, dry years or in sandy soils, it could be 20, 25, 30 bushels per acre. And those are obviously devastating situations. But on average, it's more like 5, 10%, maybe 12%.
Now, again, resistance has been the key. And I guess the main source has been what we call PI 88788, right? And that is the core resistance that you use. But I guess it's very effective, but we're facing resistance challenges now, right?
Right, because we've used those resistance genes for 25 years in Iowa. And so I draw the parallel with using herbicides, the same herbicide active ingredient for 20 or 25 years. It's the exact same phenomenon. And so in any field, there are a few nematodes that could reproduce and overcome on the resistance. But when we started out, they were an extreme minority, maybe 1 in a million worms. But since we've used those resistance genes for 20 or 25 years, they now become 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 500 of the worms that are in the soil. So we're simply selecting for what used to be an extreme minority of nematodes that were able to overcome resistance, and now they're becoming a majority of the nematodes in the field.
Now you've got other sources, Peking, and but they're used very little because they don't make good varieties.
Right. They don't have as high a yield potential.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about that is yield potential is a matter of perspective. So the Peking varieties don't yield as well as 88788 in fields where the nematode hasn't built up on 88788. But in many Iowa fields, the nematode has built up on 88788, and suddenly the Peking yields rise to the top.
Yeah.
So that yield hit that Peking has a bad reputation for isn't really in play many times once the nematode adapts or builds up on 88788.
Now, in some of the fields in Iowa, I mean, I think your threshold is 10%. So if you get 10% reproduction after using, that resistance, that's your number. But you've got some fields at 30, 50, 60%.
Yep.
What's the future for that resistance?
Well, the curve of the graph, as I plot this, it curves up, and so I guess the maximum could be 100%, or I can't imagine it being more than 100% of a susceptible. But we are in many fields, we're already halfway there. And one way to think about that is the resistance has lost half of its effectiveness. If we want resistance to allow less than 10% reproduction and as susceptible as 100% reproduction, as you mentioned, we have fields where there's 50 and 60% reproduction, so it's lost half of its resistance effectiveness.
So I guess, just to point out Ontario, I mean, I think some of the research we're looking at, we're at about 15%, so we're a little bit above the threshold, but we've also got very diverse rotations and a lot of other factors that we can sort of help manage it. So we're doing good, but it's mindful for us as well.
Yeah, and I would caution everybody in Ontario not to get a false sense of security. The thing that I didn't mention in my presentation today is once the nematode builds up reproduction on 88788, you can never bring it back down. It will never undo itself. And so prevention is the cure in this case. And so I think Ontario farmers are fortunate that they're not seeing 50 and 60% reproduction on 88788, but boy, they better hope that they never get it, because my Iowa farmers are never going to be back to 10 or 15% reproduction. It just never comes back.
Final question for you, and that is, where do we go from here? And you mentioned that in your presentation that, SCN resistance is free. It's cost zero, so there's no premium. And that's part of the challenge, because there's no incentive for anybody to invest in developing a new source. How do we get new effective sources of resistance?
Well, that's probably the toughest question we face, and because it's a business question. Companies need to pay the bills, and it will take millions of dollars to bring high-yielding soybean varieties to market with the other sources of resistance. And that costs money, and they need to recover that perhaps in terms of a premium price on seed. But the other thing that's going to happen is to get the highest yielding soybean varieties, these companies might have to switch to Peking anyway, because the nematodes in the fields that they're selling seed to those farmers is now able to reproduce on 88788. So I think Mother Nature will take care of the business question eventually if the companies aren't proactive and bring those varieties to market. But boy, there's a huge need for non-88788 resistant soybeans.
Hey Greg, thank you so much. Really a great sort of snapshot of the situation going forward. Thanks, enjoy your time here in Ridgetown.
Enjoyed meeting with you. Thank you.